Get some more on all of this. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey is joining us. He's the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. Let me get your quick reaction to the breaking news. Not one, not two, but three House committees have just subpoenaed the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, for documents involving Ukraine. You're calling on him to testify as well. In your eyes, does he bear responsibility for Rudy Giuliani's interference in State Department affairs?
Well, if Rudy Giuliani is telling the truth, then he definitely bears responsibility. Who is Rudy Giuliani as it relates to the State Department or any official position of the United States government? He has none, to my knowledge. He's not an ambassador. He's not a special envoy. He has no specific title. He has not been employed by the federal government in any regard. He's the president's private attorney, obviously playing the role of henchman in an attempt to dig up dirt on one of the president's potential political opponents. This is outrageous. This is why I've asked the Inspector General of the State Department to investigate as to what the State Department did, what it knew, what the Secretary knew, how was Rudy Giuliani facilitated, who was he given access to, what role was he allowed to play for the same documents, many of the documents that the House is asking for, which this State Department has not been willing to come forward with. And so we have the President of the United States, perversing and corrupting the use of his power to get a foreign government involved once again in our election and using the resources of the federal government, hundreds of millions of dollars that the Congress in a bipartisan way voted to give Ukraine, to defend it against Russia, being held up in an inordinate period of time, over 2 months, that preceded this call, all in an effort to get dirt on one of the president's political opponents. This is outrageous as it gets, even for this presidency. It goes to the core of our democracy and our Constitution, and that's what it has to be pursued at every cost.
I got to quickly move on, but do you know if Rudy Giuliani has security clearances?
I'm unaware of any security clearance he has or any official role or unofficial role that he has at the State Department. In all of my intercessions with the Secretary of State and with the State Department, no one has ever told me that Rudy Giuliani plays any role at any level in any way with the State Department.
Members of the House Intelligence Committee, Senator, they want to hear testimony from Giuliani, also from the Attorney General, Bill Barr. But what happens if these key witnesses refuse to cooperate?
Well, this is where, the House can play a much different role than we can in the minority in the Senate. The House has the power to subpoena these individuals. And if they fail to comply with the subpoena, not just for documents, which is what I understand that the House committees did today, but can subpoena the Secretary of State to come before their committee if, in fact, he refuses to do so voluntarily. I would hope he would do so voluntarily. I hope he would do so before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I hope that Chairman Risch will take active participation in doing the oversight, the reviews, the requests for documents, and the engagement with the Secretary of State, because this goes to the very essence of how we're conducting foreign policy in the national interest and security of the United States.
As you know, President Trump, he's attacked you personally this week, implying that you and your colleagues, Democratic colleagues, inappropriately pressured a Ukrainian prosecutor. The fact is, you were concerned the prosecutor was blocking Robert Mueller's efforts to investigate in Ukraine. But how do you respond specifically to the president's accusations, the attacks against you?
Well, this is the president's version of alternative facts. It's like when your 5-year-old gets caught doing something bad and wants to change the topic with you. The reality is that this letter sent by myself and 2 other colleagues was a result of a New York Times investigative piece that suggested that the Ukrainian prosecutor wasn't willing to provide information to Bob Mueller, the special counsel, because of fear. This is 2018. Fear that then the Trump administration would hold monies from Ukraine that was critically needed to Ukraine. So we basically said, the rule of law should be that you engage and answer the special prosecutor. Secondly, that in fact your monies should not be a threat at the end of the day. Congress supports this, and we ask 3 specific questions. So far different than the president's effort to use a foreign power to engage in our elections to ultimately affect the outcome.
The whistleblower's complaint, as you know, Senator, raises the question of whether the transcript of other inappropriate phone calls are saved on that classified server. Is that something the House and the Senate, for that matter, should pursue?
Absolutely. Look, I've been pursuing the question of President Trump's meetings and engagement with President Putin, where either there was no one present or the note takers' notes were taken supposedly by the president. I've wanted to know that conversation for quite some time, because what we saw after the president stood side by side with Putin at one of their meetings in a press conference, I think it was Helsinki, ultimately listening to the president basically give Putin the okay, oh, you know, he said he didn't do anything and I accept it. Outrageous, when all of our intelligence agencies collectively and unanimously said the opposite. So I think what we have here is the cover-up, because there's no reason to take what we now saw as this document, which the White House was trying not to provide, and put it in a special server. That server is for covert activities, maybe actions being taken by the CIA or other element of government in some place in the world, maybe sensitive negotiations, North Korea or Iran. But it certainly isn't about a conversation that was about getting dirt on your political opponent. That's a cover-up. And what we've seen in the attempts to stop access to this, and what we've seen with others, I'm concerned in the State Department. What was 2 of our ambassadors doing, engaged with Rudy Giuliani as it relates to his efforts over there? So I'm concerned that it's not only the actions, it's now the cover-up that seems to be taking place.
Senator Menendez, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.